And go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Holly Fiorello, and I'm here with Phil Murphy today. This is the next series in our Fireside chat, where we're going to talk about some industry trends. Phil has some unique insight as he's both an operator with Next-Door Self-Storage and also the founder of CallPotential. Phil, could you go ahead and give us a little bit of information what we're going to be covering today?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Holly. We've had a lot of customers reaching out to us, and a lot of the conversations really been trying to understand, how is kind of the in the midst of COVID different than pre-COVID? I had certain expectations as I'm going into the rental season or I'm going into my customer interactions. And so we've heard a lot of conversation about what are leads like, what are rentals like, what are call volumes like? And, we're in a pretty unique situation with the thousands of locations that we cover in CallPotential, that we thought it would be good to go out, look at that, kind of see if we can help answer some of those questions. What did that first part of April look like as compared to the other months or previous years? And for anybody that's not familiar, CallPotential, we're a lead management CRM platform. We run the lead process, the collection process, the call center, contact centers of many of the largest operators in the industry. So I thought it would be good to kind of bring all that data together and see if we can come up with some good understanding of what's going on in the industry. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So this is a presentation that we've really put together around what we're seeing in the industry. So one of the big things is we took a look to see what did the call volumes look like. Where and how were people calling us? So, were people still reaching out over the phone? Were they using other mechanisms to do that? And when it came translated from there into our leads, were we seeing lead volumes? The anticipation has always been that lead volumes will drop. Was that the case? If so, how did that compare to previous years, previous months? And then what are people doing about those leads that are coming in? Also, at the same time, when it comes to our customers, we're seeing lower move-outs in many stores, but what are we doing as far as people that are looking to pay? Are people continuing to pay, or how are they paying? Have they changed some of those habits? And the way we looked at this is we looked at it in a couple different ways. One is looking at it in terms of a change versus last month. So comparing the first 5 days of April to the first 5 days of March, what was different? Also looking at it year over year. So the first 5 days of April in 2020, was it different than the first 5 days in 2019? And then looking at those delta changes throughout as well to really try and get an overall picture of what that looked like. So as we kind of hop in to that, the first thing we really started diving into was our call volume. And so what we ended up finding was that customers are calling in. The customers, the leads, they're still placing phone calls, but not necessarily at the same rate that they have in previous years. What we found was that during all this, inbound call volume was down about 15% versus normal growth. Now, to explain that a little bit, we typically see from March to April a 25% growth in calls. The volume of calls we get in March to the volume of calls we get in April has always been about a 25% increase. This year we only saw about a 10% increase. So it's not that people aren't calling. It's not that we're dropping off in a dramatic fashion. We just didn't have the same growth that we normally see in call volume. And at the same time, we've seen a significant growth in terms of what calls are rolling to contact centers. So contact centers, whether call centers, things like that, it's going out, and we're seeing that actually increase about 7%. What we found was a lot of that is because many operators are trying to have to make that decision. Do they stay in operation? Do they let the calls roll over to the contact center? Do they reduce hours? And so we've seen, even though we saw a lower growth in call volume, we did see a higher growth in what's making it to the contact center. And a lot of that's really stemmed from operational decisions, but what we found in terms of analyzing that data is we're still getting calls, we're still getting things coming through. It's just becoming more important to be the one that's able to answer them, to be the one that's there due to that lower volume that's in there.
So Phil, couple questions. So for the contact centers answering more, that's obviously where we have the software that operators can customize where their call routes go, whether it's to like a dedicated set of agents or remote agents, right?
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of that. Our software, the CallPotential software, runs the contact centers of most of the large operators in the industry that have internal call centers. And so what we found is a lot of those contact centers had to do a lot of physical movement. They used to have this centralized model. They used to have this, everybody's in kind of that typical cubicle fashion. We've actually spent the last few weeks getting those people distributed back out into work from home status so that they're able to continue to answer calls if their stores are closing. But even with that, volume has continued to increase. The number of agents that we've seen online has continued to increase. And really the answer rate of all those calls has continued to increase significantly.
Why, in your interpretation of the data, why do you think that the contact centers are seeing an increase, even though there's a reduction in total calls to all locations?
No, it's a good question. A lot of that has to do with the store teams. A lot of the stores in certain states, some operators are deciding to keep their storefronts open. Some operators are deciding to lock the doors. Some operators are deciding to completely shut down the local store operation. And especially in that last group, all those calls are rolling into the call center. And so they're having to be answered by somebody. They're having to be dealt with. And so, we're seeing a lot of increase in terms of volume that's coming in, whether they're taking, the agents are taking payments, they're doing over the phone rentals, they're just capturing a typical lead process. But all of that volume is increasing across all those groups.
Were you surprised to see that there was still an increase in call volume, even though it was down year over year?
I was surprised to see that there was that much of a swing, even with a significant overall drop that the contact centers continue to show growth. I would have expected somewhat of a normal contact center growth with the drop, but that just shows how much many of the operators, at least in the CallPotential platform, are beginning to depend on that contact center that they've gotten in place.
Gotcha.
So yeah, no, the next area that we really wanted to go into is, okay, all those calls are coming in, but really it's what does that translate to into leads? And there's been a lot of webinars out there talking about leads and where they were the month of March, beginning half, second half, things like that. What we wanted to do was look and go, okay, so far in April, what have I seen? How did that compare to last April? How did that compare to March, the month before? And what we actually saw was the month of April, the first 5 days, saw about a 29% drop in lead volume. Historically, March to April has actually been a 26% increase month over month, but that drop that we're seeing is a pretty significant drop. The interesting part about that, though, is that while we're seeing a lot lower volume of leads, now this is not just phone leads, this is website leads, this is in-store leads, this is all types of leads we're talking about here. So it's not just call center or things like that, because we've actually seen phone leads increase as a relative impact versus in-store for the same reasons I talked about call volume, but also the online leads we've seen increase as well. But the main thing is the average follow-up. Our managers and contact centers are having to work even harder to get that rental. What we actually saw, we keep track of the number of leads, number of follow-ups that an average lead has to have. And what we found is last month in March, we were averaging about 2.8 follow-ups per lead. That's increased slightly, around 10%, a little under about 9% to little over 3 follow-ups per lead. Now, the interesting thing with that is those follow-ups have changed in how they're being done. We've seen a significant jump in text follow-ups. We've seen a significant jump in email follow-ups. So it's how do we interact with them? How do we go about that process? It's just kind of showing that with that decreased volume, it's taking more effort to get them to rent. Because the good thing is we saw rental conversions weren't really changing. As time where we're looking at those leads that were coming in the first part of the month, they're converting at about the same rate as they were in previous months, but there's just fewer of them with more follow-up being done. So it's showing, we have to be very diligent. We have to be very aggressive in staying in contact with somebody who's looking to rent. So the positive side is the phone's ringing. The positive side is those that are seeking out storage are looking to actually rent it. But it is something where we're having to work harder to make sure they pick us, and especially communicating to them that, hey, we're still in business, we're still in operation, or if you're not, making sure there's a method with which to have that contactless rental. One of the major REITs, CubeSmart, just released their contactless rental, which has the online component, but also the over the phone component. And that's been one of the big things we've seen a shift in our own customer base, is because with the CallPotential contact center, they're able to do those over the phone rentals. And so we're seeing that more and more bleeding into more operations, and hopefully helping to provide channels for people to rent that otherwise might have to go to somewhere else.
So looking at your average follow-ups per lead, is that the average follow-ups to get to a rental, or just what we're seeing in that first week? How many follow-ups are going out?
That's the average follow-ups that are taking place in that for a lead that's coming in, whether it converts or not.
Okay.
Now that's all follow-ups. So that's text follow-ups, that's email follow-ups, that's phone call follow-ups, but it's showing how important it is to be reaching out and following up. Now,
so it's a combination of manual and automated?
Yes, this is any follow-up.
Okay.
Now, it's not just going up and calling somebody, it's texting them, it's emailing them, it's how are we reaching out to them. So we're seeing more of a driving force for different channels, different types, more frequency to try and bring that to a rental.
And the conversion rates are consistent, even though we're seeing a lower lead
overall,
volume?
there's certainly some stores that have higher and lower conversion rates. There, but across our portfolio of stores that are on the CallPotential platform, we're seeing pretty even conversion rates with what we've seen. Now, there's a little fluctuation here and there, and that will only tell time as we continue through the month what's happening with them. But it's within kind of that normal rate.
Have you, as an operator, have you initiated any changes with your store teams on how they're following up, or that they need to follow up stronger?
Yeah, no, we're continuing to follow up as we were. Obviously CallPotential really kind of dictates that schedule of those things that are automated and text and email, but then also that manual call. But we're really, making sure our managers are following up with it. We're doing a lot more friendly of a follow-up. Hey, just wanted to see how everything's going, if everything's okay, if you still needed that storage, we still got it here. It's really having that relationship versus just, hey, I had that 10 by 10 reserved for you for $100. You coming in or not? Because people are looking, it's just a much more caring time that we're trying to present an image to, at least in my own stores.
And I know your teams are also promoting the contactless rentals to let them know that you're keeping your customers' safety in mind.
Yeah, we've moved to e-sign. We've done where we'll text or email the lease. There's just a lot of efforts to make it possible to rent it without coming in the store. For instance, one of the things that we do is we take we have vacant units. There's a lock in every one of them, little breakaway tag, so that way we can rent it over the phone. We can rent it over our website without them having to come in and do that. Now, obviously when it comes to driver's license, things like that, we typically try and collect those using text message, using some of those other tools, the email, to get that in there so we can attach it to their lease. But we'll end up having to sort some of this stuff out post-COVID, and it's just, what do we figure out at that point in time?
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. What else do you got?
The next thing that we really looked at is customer and payment data. What we're really looking at is how are customers going out and paying? How are we going out and collecting on those customers? What we found is kind of the overall story. Operators are softening their approach. We're trying to figure out how do we deal with the time? How do we not have that cold view of what's going on, especially a lot of the pain and impact that a lot of our customers are feeling. And so, changing the tone of the messaging, changing the frequency of the messaging, but still continuing the messaging, because we found a lot of our customers are dependent upon the ability to pay by a particular method. Now, at that same time, whether it's text or email or phone or whatever methods that are being offered, we found on our platform, we saw about a 14% increase in self-service payments. So there's a strong drive for customers to be able to pay in a contactless manner. The biggest jumps for that was pay by phone IVR. So that's the pay by phone system where within CallPotential, you'll call in, it recognizes who you are, tells you what your balance is, lets you pay with a prepaid, with an existing card that you might have on file, or email as well, text as well. But we're really seeing an increase across the board in all of those methods. But at the same time, one of the things that it kind of goes without saying for many operators, we've seen an elimination or a reduction in the convenience fees that we're being out there being charged. Many operators would charge $3, $4, $10 to use a self-serve payment method, and we've seen those go down to zero or down to smaller figures to make it easier, to kind of eliminate and to overcome that store closure or that inability to come out, because a lot of us we need that money to come in versus worrying about the couple bucks on convenience. So we actually saw a 74% reduction in the number and amount of convenience fees being charged to those contactless, those payment methods.
Wow.
But one of the other things that we also saw was how are we going out and letting people know when they're delinquent? A lot of people, as I had talked about before, they're reliant upon that kind of reminder that, hey, by the way, my rent's due. It's the first of the month, because many of us have many other things we're dealing with, and then if we're not on auto pay, it's how do we go out and deal with that? So we actually saw a 32% reduction in auto dialed calls going out to people, but we did see subsequent text and email volume go up, as well as the amount of payments, as I kind of talked about in the first bullet point there, increasing. We also did see a significant increase in auto pay enrollment. So the interesting thing was, because I thought a lot of people in this time wouldn't necessarily head to auto pay, but we saw a significant jump in those that are enrolling in auto pay as well, to be able to kind of set it and forget it, to not deal with it, because as operators, at least for myself, it's always a bigger deal to have that auto pay versus having to sit there and make that mental decision to go out and send my payment in this month.
That's what I was actually just looking for. I was going to ask you about the auto pay because I swear that I saw something come across around that.
Yeah.
So silver lining, people are still paying their rent, basically.
Yeah, we're still seeing payments coming in. We're not seeing a dramatic shift in terms of delinquency. We're seeing a little slower. We're seeing some margin of error. Some stores in my own portfolio are a little fast, or a little ahead of the curve. Some of them a little behind the curve. But as a portfolio, we're pretty even with where we've been in the past. And then talking to some of the other operators that are trying to answer these questions as well, very similar outcomes that they're seeing in terms of some stores are ahead, some stores are behind, but overall, it's not an alarming point we're at yet. Obviously each month will be its own decision in terms of what customers are deciding, but we're planning to do this kind of data update and where things are, as we continue to go through the crisis, to give you guys an understanding of what are we seeing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that operators are softening their approach and it's being well met.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those, rather than cutting the interaction with customers, I saw a seminar talking about how to deal with this, and it's communication. We've got to be going out and checking in on our customers. We've got to be going out and communicating them in ways they expect us to, and then maybe some ways that are new to them, so that they can stay in contact, they can interact with us, keeping up to date. My own operations, we're reaching out to some customers, and especially those that are on delinquency, taking hey, is everything okay? Is there anything we can do? We're starting to adopt some policies and procedures around, how are we going to deal with a customer who's been displaced in their work? Because, obviously we want to keep that customer long-term and dealing with the short-term hit. If it helps with dealing just as society in general, at least with next door storage, we've made some of that decision to do as well.
And I know we have a manager payment portal that a manager can go to and make a payment. Have you changed any of your approach around if your managers are working from home, if they're using the manager payment portal, or do you not see them get contacted at all with credit cards because it's automatically being recognized by the system? Are you doing anything different there?
No, so we've got our within CallPotential, we've got what is our smart route. So everybody that calls in, if they're delinquent, they automatically get routed to our pay by phone system. However, if that fails, they're calling from an unknown phone number, they'll end up at our managers, and our managers are more than happy to process the payment. So it's one of those where we continue to service them any way we can. Money's money, and we want to get it in. The one thing that we at my stores we're not doing is accepting cash in stores that are closed, just because of what's going on there. Send them off for money orders or checks or credit cards or things like that. For those stores that are open, they can certainly pay in cash, but we've had to adjust depending on the circumstances of the store.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, the next thing, really talking about kind of some of the trends that we're seeing. So really kind of summarizing it, we're seeing a push towards that contactless payment options, where we see people going out there going, okay, you know what, needing to stay in front of your customers, reminding them what's coming up and rents are due and when they're due, especially those that might not be first of the month or might be anniversary. When the day jumps around, it's when do I remember to go out and pay my rent? Going out there, figuring out how are we going to adjust our operations, knowing that, okay, we've got to actively be pursuing our leads, whether through a system or manually or whatever that is, just capture those leads, following up with them, working them in different ways that may be different, but then also that communication, making sure it's not tone deaf to the environment we're in, that it's keeping in mind that a lot of people are in a lot of distress. How do we work with those people? How do we make sure that we're being as empathetic as we can, while continuing to stay within what our business requires. And then, really the last thing is these fireside chats. We've done a couple of them. Sometimes we've had guests on. Sometimes it's the two of us talking. Sometimes it's others. We're going to continue to do those and trying to get as much information out to people, trying to get as much data out there in terms of what we're seeing, whether it's in the store level or CallPotential level, so you guys can all make better decisions and at least get a perspective, right or wrong, as to what others are doing and what kind of results we're seeing.
I think that's really important, Phil, that we know that this is our current climate that we're in and we have to adapt to it, and we need to share the information with everyone so they can adapt too, stronger
Totally
together,
agree.
all that good stuff. Awesome. Well, do you have any other insights? I know we're just newly into it. We've got a couple weeks to go. We have a couple weeks under our belt. What are you hoping to see in the next, few weeks?
I mean, the biggest thing is for my stores, we're on that first of the month billing. And so every kind of sixth of the month is going to be a big telling sign for us. Are we going to see any shift in how people are paying or whether they're paying or those interactions or rentals and move outs? Right now, we haven't seen a lot of move outs. We've seen a decrease in leads and move-ins. But at the end, we're netting in a pretty stable environment. It's not the spring rent up we all hope for. But it's something that there are steps and actions, at least on my stores, we're taking. And I'm hoping, in Illinois, at least, we're supposed to be done, and federally, we're supposed to be done April 30th. We don't know whether that'll get extended or in what manner that may or may not get extended. So, the big thing for me is as an owner and operator myself, it's very important that I prepare for it to be extended. I don't want to get caught flat-footed. I want to make sure my operations are in place. I want to make sure the information's out there. And there's a lot of webinars and data coming out like this one. I listen to a lot of those. Hopefully you all are listening to a lot of those, understanding what people are doing and making adjustments, because in all reality, what we're talking about right now, a week from now, is going to be out of date. And it's going to be important to get those constant, reliable sources of data to understand, is your world any different than what the rest of the world's seeing, or is everybody else seeing the same thing? And therefore, you're doing things right, whether you're at or beating those trend lines.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Look forward to seeing you in the next one.